Do you hear that chilling laughter? It's not from a horror movie, but from a toy that once resided in thousands of children's bedrooms in the 1970s. Today, we're going to explore the weirdest toys ever created. From dolls that haunted children to toxic playsets advertised as great features. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some of these toys are now worth thousands of dollars, while others remain hidden away forever. Hugo Man of 1,000 Faces. Let's begin our journey of discovery with a toy that at first glance made many people frown. Hugo Man of 1,000 Faces. Released by Kenner Toys, this was not a normal doll you'd find on a toy shelf. Essentially, Hugo was a crash course in the art of disguise for children. You'd receive a bald, smooth plastic head, accompanied by all sorts of accessories. Wigs, fake scars, pliable clay, and even fake beards. Kenner's original idea was for children to unleash their creativity, transforming Hugo into anyone they wanted, from a funny character to a sophisticated gentleman. However, this is where things took a strange and unexpected turn. Instead of creating whimsical or adorable characters, thousands of children astonishingly converged on transforming Hugo into the most terrifying faces possible. They would spend hours meticulously molding grotesque scars, attaching crooked mustaches, and giving Hugo an unchanging, soulless gaze. They created horrifying figures as if they had stepped right out of children's worst nightmares. Some parents even reported finding their children's Hugo dolls hidden in closets, not because they were afraid of Hugo, but because the children themselves had scared themselves with their own chilling creations. Baby Laugh-A-Lot. If Hugo was creepy enough, then brace yourself for Baby Laugh-A-Lot, perhaps the most inappropriately named toy in history. A toy whose mere presence could shroud an entire house in a spooky atmosphere. Renko must have thought they were creating an adorable laughing doll, bringing joy to every home. But what they actually created was pure, unadulterated horror fuel. When the batteries were fresh, the doll's laughter was already quite unsettling and unnatural, carrying an uneasy undertone. It didn't sound like innocent child's laughter, but rather something forced, even malicious. But that wasn't the worst part. The real horror story began when those batteries started to run low. The laughter would slow down, become deeper, raspy, and echo throughout the house at 3 a.m., like a ghost seeking attention. Imagine yourself in a deep sleep, and suddenly from a dark corner of the room, a ghostly, distorted laugh begins to reverberate, each syllable drawn out like a curse. Many children lived in extreme fear, believing that Baby Laugh-A-Lot had a soul of its own, a wicked disposition. It transformed a doll that was supposed to bring comfort into a haunting object, a source of endless nightmares. Growing Up Skipper. Barbie's sister, one of the most controversial doll versions of all time. Skipper, introduced in 1964, was Barbie's first family member. Mattel's response to criticisms that Barbie looked too mature. Instead of giving Barbie a child, Mattel cleverly created a younger sister for Barbie to look after. But in 1975, Mattel launched the Growing Up Skipper version. And this is when things got peculiar. With Growing Up Skipper, you could transform her from a little girl to a teenager simply by rotating her arm. As the arm was rotated, her breasts would develop, her height would increase, and other bodily changes would occur. This led to a wave of parents rushing to return them to stores, feeling shocked and uncomfortable with the idea of a doll undergoing puberty right before their children's eyes. Even stranger was how Mattel marketed this toy. Now she's growing up just like you. Cheerful advertisements conveyed this message, as if watching a doll go through puberty in a few seconds was completely normal. The click of this mechanism still haunts those who owned it to this day. And if you rotated the arm the other way, she would instantly return to childhood, a feature many wished real puberty had a reverse button for. Jolly Chimp. And if Baby Laugh-A-Lot wasn't enough to haunt your dreams, then Jolly Chimp is the perfect accomplice. Hearing the name Jolly Chimp, you might think of a happy, mischievous monkey. But believe me, there's nothing happy or jolly about this toy. With its vacant, empty eyes and clanking mechanical movements, it looks like something straight out of a horror movie. In fact, Jolly Chimp actually became the inspiration for several horror films later on. Its glowing red eyes, wide-open mouth with metal teeth, and incessant clashing cymbals created a terrifying spectacle. Many children swore that their Jolly Chimp would spontaneously start playing in the middle of the night, the metal cymbals echoing in the silent darkness, even though no one touched it. Some adults today are still haunted by the image and sound of Jolly Chimp, viewing it as a symbol of gratuitous creepiness in children's toys. It is the embodiment of bizarre design, transforming a simple toy into an object capable of causing lasting fear, a fear that many still feel whenever they see an image of this cymbal-banging monkey. Lazy Daisy Doll. And here is the Lazy Daisy Doll, released by Ideal in 1971 for about $5.99. Believe it or not, that was a pretty significant investment for a doll that essentially suffered from narcolepsy. This particular toy had a very unique feature. The moment you laid her down anywhere, she would immediately fall into a deep sleep. What's even stranger is that this feature didn't require batteries, which makes it even more unsettling when you think about it. Parents reported finding these dolls face down in the most random places in the house, from under the sofa to the middle of the hallway, startling quite a few family members. Today, toy collectors actively seek out these narcoleptic dolls, with models in good condition selling for hundreds of dollars. Perhaps there's something charming about a doll that perfectly captures the feeling we all experience on every Monday morning, or simply an inexplicable oddity that collectors cherish. Did you ever own one of these spooky dolls? Share your memories in the comments. Elastic Bubble Plastic. If the previous toys primarily caused mental fear, then Elastic Bubble Plastic posed a different, much more insidious threat. This was a special type of plastic from a tube. You'd squeeze out a small amount and use a straw to blow it into a bubble. Sounds fun, right? But here's where it gets strange and dangerous. Every bubble children blew came with a complimentary dose of toxic fumes. The chemical smell was so strong it could clear a room, making you cough uncontrollably. But back then, this was considered part of the fun. Parents even thought that the stronger the smell, the better the bubble, believing it was a sign of quality. It turned out that it wasn't magical smoke as they thought, but harmful chemicals that children were directly inhaling into their lungs. Milky, the marvelous milking cow. The idea behind Milky. The marvelous milking cow was supposedly clever but lacked the necessary practicality and hygiene. This was a plastic cow with rubber udders, and children were supposed to pour water into those udders and then milk it. The marketing team for this toy called it an educational experience, helping children understand the origin of milk and the milking process. However, many parents called it dubious and unsanitary. The real problem wasn't just the act of milking a plastic cow itself. The main issue was that water would sit in those rubber udders for days, creating an ideal damp environment for bacteria to grow. One mother called it a science experiment that no one asked for, a sticky, smelly mess. Not to mention the cleanup process after each play session, a chore no parent desired. Shogun Warriors. Moving away from strange dolls, let's turn to a toy that was both dangerous and incredibly cool in a 70s kind of way. Shogun Warriors. These were giant robots, almost 60 centimeters tall, and came with an impressive arsenal of spring-loaded weapons. Their main highlight was the ability to launch fists, missiles, and any other parts across the room with incredible force. Children at the time absolutely loved them, as they provided a sense of action and destruction that no other toy could match. Emergency room doctors, however, were not thrilled with the popularity of Shogun Warriors. This was because some robot models could launch plastic missiles with enough force to dent walls and even injure players or those around them. The best or most terrifying, depending on your perspective, thing was that the Shogun Warriors instruction manual actually suggested players aim at their friends. This shows a completely different attitude towards toy safety compared to today, where encouraging children to shoot objects at each other would be unacceptable. JJ Arms. If you thought launching plastic missiles was intense, meet JJ Arms, perhaps the most surprisingly realistic toy of the decade. This action figure was based on a real-life private detective who lost both his arms in an accident and replaced them with prosthetics. The toy version, an action figure for children, came with interchangeable hook hands. And even more astonishingly, it also had a knife hand. That's right, they created an action figure for children with a real, sharp, and potentially dangerous knife accessory. Imagine a child holding the JJ Arms figure, removing a hook hand, and attaching a knife replacement to recreate action scenes. This could only have happened in the 1970s, a completely different era in terms of views on toys and child safety. It's clear to see how the line between brutal reality and children's play was incredibly blurred in this decade. Which item on this list surprised you most with its potential danger? Leave a comment. Big Jim's Wolfpack. Big Jim's Wolfpack were action figures that took playtime battles to a whole new level. Each character came with realistic-looking weapons and a signature karate chop move. They were designed to provide intense and realistic action play experiences. However, what was truly strange and made people laugh was the outfits these guys wore. They donned what could only be described as battle-ready beachwear. Imagine mighty warriors, fully armed, yet wearing floral shorts and colorful tank tops, ready to rush into battle on the beach. Somehow, they created action figures that were both dangerous with realistic weapons and had questionable, baffling attire. While modern toys undergo months of rigorous safety testing, these toys seem to operate on a let's see what happens policy. And the craziest part is that some of them were bestsellers. Among these strange toys, did any of them connect with an unforgettable memory of yours? Tell me your story. Pulsar, the ultimate man of adventure. Let's explore the strange world of sci-fi toys with Pulsar, the ultimate man of adventure. This was a 33-centimeter tall action figure with a transparent chest plate that could open, revealing glowing internal organs inside. That's right, you heard correctly, glowing internal organs. Children could actually remove and play with Pulsar's heart, lungs, and other soft parts. Parents probably thought they were buying an educational toy, helping their children understand the human body. But what they actually got was the sight of their children performing plastic surgery on the living room floor, nonchalantly disassembling hearts and lungs. Pulsar is a great example of the unique but also somewhat bizarre creativity of the 70s, as they tried to turn science into a game in a way that today might make many people raise an eyebrow. Hypnos. Pulsar wasn't the extent of the weirdness. There was also a combination that was sure to make many adults scratch their heads. He also had a sworn enemy named Hypnos, who brought a unique twist to the anatomical action figure trend. While Pulsar proudly displayed his internal organs, Hypnos possessed a mind control wheel right in his head. When you spun this wheel, Hypnos' face would change expressions, from a frown to surprise and all sorts of other emotional states. It was supposed to represent Hypnos' mind control abilities, but in reality, most people just thought Hypnos looked like he was having a really confusing day, bewildered by what was happening. Together with Pulsar, they formed the strangest hero-villain dynamic in toy history. One guy showing off his guts, while his enemy had an emotional ring in his brain. Jaws board game. Just when you thought it was safe to go back to the toy store, the Jaws board game swam onto the shelves. Imagine the familiar game of Operation, but instead of maneuvering funny bones and rubber bands, you're trying to fish dubious items out of the mouth of a giant shark. This game came with a plastic shark whose jaws would snap shut randomly, often just as you were fumbling with gooey plastic fish parts. Advertisements claimed this game was fun for the whole family, although most families probably didn't expect their game night to include minor finger injuries and startled screams. It offered a dramatic thrill, but also no less potential danger, turning an evening of entertainment into an unexpected adventure and possibly some painful bites. Ventriloquist Dolls. Ventriloquist Dolls, dolls that many parents bought for their children thinking they were educational, but children at the time knew much better. These weren't normal cloth dolls. They were specially made with movable mouths, and the creepiest part was their empty eyes that seemed to follow you across the room. While parents hoped they would help children develop storytelling or performance skills, the reality was quite different. Children often felt uneasy playing with these dolls, with the feeling that they had a life of their own, a will of their own. There's a good reason why so many of these dolls were found stuffed in attics years later, often facing the wall. It wasn't forgetfulness, but an attempt to escape their haunting gaze and strange presence. These ventriloquist dolls, with their unusually human-like appearance yet lack of soul, instilled an indescribable sense of creepiness, turning innocent games into terrifying experiences for young children. Among these strange toys, did any of them connect with an unforgettable memory of yours? Comment below. Star Team Toys. Star Team Toys were released by Ideal in 1978. These action figures were an obvious, even blatant attempt to cash in on the phenomenal success of the Star Wars movie. The resemblance was so close that George Lucas noticed and was not happy at all. The subsequent lawsuit was even more entertaining than the toys themselves. Take, for example, the character Knight of Darkness, the main villain of this toy line. He looked less like a fearsome space villain and more like he'd just wandered off to a disco-themed costume party. Despite being sued by George Lucas, the court ruled in Ideal's favor, noting that Star actually stood for space travel and reconnaissance. Although they did get their own Marvel comic series, these toys are now just an amusing reminder of how the 70s interpreted space adventure. Collectors particularly value the Knight of Darkness character, primarily for his unintentional comedic value. Pogo Sticks. The Pogo Stick was once considered the fairest weapon in the neighborhood. You didn't need to be the fastest runner or the best athlete. Just mastering this toy, any child could become the star of the block. For many, the moment of tearing open Christmas wrapping paper and seeing the glistening red and silver Pogo Stick was the gateway to a world of adventure and seemingly endless possibilities. Long afternoons were spent jumping up, bouncing down, searching for the perfect balance. The bowing sound of the spring reverberating, the clack of the foot pegs on the pavement, and the feeling of the wind on your face as your body flew higher, further, all blended into a simple kind of magic. In a child's imagination, it could be an adventure as a kangaroo in the wilderness, or a transformation into a superhero who could leap over skyscrapers with a single bounce. Of course, mastering the Pogo Stick was not easy. Falls, scraped knees, and challenged pride were almost inevitable, yet persistence always brought its worthy reward. When one's feet could propel them seamlessly down the street and back without a single stumble, that feeling was nothing short of conquering the world. This toy became a symbol of resilience, a never-give-up spirit, and the pure joy of childhood. Hasbro's Great Moves game. In 1978, Hasbro's Great Moves game was clearly designed to capitalize on the success of the Twister game, but added an artistic, twisted element that no one asked for. Players would attach a marker to different body parts, such as their hands, feet, or even their head, and try to draw while a partner wore a small whiteboard on their body. The results were often more abstract than expected, and depending on where the marker ended up, some drawings could make even Jackson Pollock blush with embarrassment. The toy's short market lifespan was likely related to parents' reluctance to combine permanent markers with their children's uncontrolled body movements. Can you imagine permanent ink stains on walls, floors, or worse, on the children's own clothes? It was a fun idea but lacked practicality and applicability in a home environment. Creepy crawlers. Ah, Mattel's creepy crawlers, the stuff of many children's childhood dreams. I vividly remember the feeling of tearing open that gift box on Christmas morning, the smell of new plastic filling the air. The shiny metal molds held so many possibilities, just waiting to create hideous yet awesome bugs. Children spent hours hunched over the machine, mouths agape, watching the viscous liquid transform into spindly legs and plump bodies. The sizzling and cracking sounds as they baked were like a symphony of mad science in my ears. Sure, they accidentally burned themselves a few times with the hot Creepy Crawlers logo, but that was a small price to pay for endless fun. Their room became a neon menagerie of creatures crawling everywhere until my mom discovered them and made me put them in the garage. Still, those gooey, sticky creations will always hold a special, slightly sticky place in my heart. It was the magic of creating unique things with your own hands, even if they were a little creepy. Sunshine Family Dolls. Sunshine Family Dolls were Mattel's answer to parents concerned about Barbie's glamorous, materialistic lifestyle. Steve, Steffi, and Baby Sweets were the anti-Barbie trio, a completely different kind of family. They had their own craft shop and a much more modest wardrobe than the opulent Barbie. These ethically conscious dolls wore simple clothes, made their own furniture, and probably would have pursued organic farming if it had been a trend in the 70s. Their accessories included crafting tools and a delivery truck that looked more at home at a folk festival than a fashion show. Today, modern collectors appreciate them as a counterculture alternative to the mainstream fashion dolls of the era. They represented a different ideal of life, focused on self-sufficiency, closeness to nature, and simple family values. The Inchworm. The Inchworm, oh, that toy was once the trusted companion of so many children. I remember clearly the day my parents brought it home, fresh from the toy store. It was love at first sight. Kids surely sat for hours, fascinated, watching it coil itself up and move inch by inch, clanking with each movement. Its bright colors and friendly face made it seem alive, with a soul. The neighborhood kids took it everywhere, to the park, to school, even tried to sneak it into church once, which parents were not thrilled about. It became part of so many adventures. Some children even remember making it a tiny superhero cape at some point. Looking back, it's amazing how something so simple could spark such endless joy and imagination. If you ever owned one, you've probably wondered what happened to your old friend. Perhaps it's still out there somewhere, bringing smiles to another child. Disturbing homeless doll. Looking back, it's hard to believe something like the disturbing homeless doll was ever on toy shelves. Still with the scary dolls, and this was a product from Hasbro, what they called the disturbing homeless doll. Even if you never actually owned one, you distinctly remember seeing the commercials as a kid and feeling both fascinated and terrified at the same time. There was something about its appearance, with ragged clothes and empty eyes, that made many feel profoundly uneasy. Who thought that creating a toy from the most vulnerable people in society was a good idea? Some might think they were perhaps trying to teach children empathy and compassion, but they really missed the mark entirely. It felt more like mockery than a learning tool. Many were scared of and avoided that doll. They felt it seemed to always watch them from the corner of the room and judge with those empty eyes. Many recount that their heart pounded every time they saw an image of this toy. Ronald McDonald doll. On a slightly less scary note, let's turn to the Ronald McDonald doll. Clowns are supposed to be fun and friendly, but there was always something a bit off about old Ronald. Maybe it was his perpetual smile, the way his eyes seemed to follow you around the room. Or perhaps just the fact that he represented a giant fast food corporation determined to sell hamburgers to children. Either way, we had a love-hate relationship with the Ronald McDonald doll. You might remember your grandmother having one and keeping it in the living room, where we often slept when visiting. She thought it was cute, a little Americana to greet you. But for us, it was the source of endless nightmares. If you suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and saw that doll sitting at the end of the bed, smiling at you in the moonlight, how many times were you startled? Kids would pull the covers over their heads and try to convince themselves it was just their imagination, but deep down, everyone knew the truth. Ronald was watching, always watching. Despite those childhood fears, we have to admit that the Ronald McDonald doll still holds a certain charm. It was a simpler time when a trip to McDonald's was the ultimate treat, and the thought of a hamburger and fries could brighten your whole week. You might remember saving your allowance to buy a Happy Meal just so you could get the latest McDonald's toy. And if that toy happened to be a miniature Ronald, you could overlook your discomfort for the sake of the collection. Verte Bird? Verte Bird. That was a toy that truly captured the imagination of all children when they were young. It was both a helicopter and a car. What could be better than that? Who remembers seeing the commercial for the first time and just being awestruck? The way it took off from the ground, rotors spinning, then seamlessly transitioned to driving mode. It was like something out of a spy movie. Kids begged their parents for one, constantly dropping not-so-subtle hints at every opportunity. And on a special day like a birthday, they would finally own that bright green and yellow box, just waiting to be torn open. The smell of new plastic, its weight in your hand, felt like heaven. We even spent hours driving that car around the house, making engine noises and pretending we were on top-secret missions. Verte Bird could conquer any terrain. Hardwood floors, carpets, even the treacherous landscape of my mom's garden, much to her displeasure. It was a reliable companion, ready for any adventure a young child's mind could dream of. Of course, like most toys of that era, the Verte Bird wasn't built to last. After a few months of intense play, the stickers started peeling, the propellers warped, and the battery compartment wouldn't close. But even in its damaged state, many still loved it intensely. Suckerman. Suckerman. Oh, where to begin with this toy? If you grew up in the 70s, chances are you had at least one of these weird, stretchy creatures in your toy box. They came in all sorts of vibrant colors: neon green, fluorescent yellow, electric blue, and had strange suction cup hands and feet that could stick to almost anything. The commercials made Suckerman look like the coolest thing ever. You could throw it at the wall and watch it slowly crawl down, or stretch it to incredible lengths and then let it snap back. It was marketed as a wacky, wild toy that would provide hours of entertainment. Try to remember playing Suckerman Slap with friends, seeing who could get their Suckerman to stick to the weirdest places. The TV screen, the dog's back, your sibling's forehead. We'd have competitions to see who could stretch their Suckerman the longest without breaking it, or who could make the loudest pop sound when throwing it against the wall. It was a simple toy, but it brought pure joy and laughter. A symbol of the innocence and weirdness of 70s toys. Skinny Bones family. Speaking of things found in attics, the Skinny Bones family would probably take the crown for weirdness. Imagine someone looked at a simple stick figure drawing and thought, "That's it! Let's turn this into a toy line." That's exactly what happened. These were bone-thin dolls with unsettling clacking joints every time they moved. They were advertised as a fun toy family, bringing laughter and joy. In reality, however, they looked more like something you'd find in a miniature haunted house, rather than children's playmates. With their gaunt, lifeless bodies and eerie clacking sounds, they created a sense of unease rather than fun. This toy is a prime example of how creative boundaries in the 70s sometimes went inexplicably astray, producing products that even adults today have to wonder, what were they thinking? Toy cigarettes and pipes. And finally, let's talk about toy cigarettes and pipes. Goodness, can you imagine giving a toy like that to a child today? It sounds so wild, so taboo. But back in the 70s, it was just another part of playing grown up. You might remember having a little pack of candy cigarettes. You'd pull one out during recess, pretend to smoke it, and blow out imaginary smoke. Back then, we thought we were the coolest ever. And then there was this bubble pipe, a small plastic device into which you'd pour a special liquid and blow, creating a stream of tiny bubbles that looked exactly like smoke. It felt so sophisticated to puff on that thing, as if you were a tiny gentleman in a fancy club. Of course, looking back, the whole concept of toy cigarettes and pipes seems quite bizarre. Essentially, we were being encouraged to mimic a habit that we now know is incredibly harmful. It's crazy to think about how much attitudes have changed in just a few decades, but at the time, it was all innocent fun. We didn't know any better. We were just kids playing grown-up, trying on different roles and identities like costumes, and in a way, that's what childhood is all about. Experimenting, exploring, and figuring out who we want to be. 30 most dangerous toys from the 1960s that are now banned. The 1960s were truly the era of wild, unforgettable toys, when danger was half the fun and rules were practically non-existent. Parents rarely worried, and we played with toys that would downright terrify today's safety experts. You'll be surprised and maybe even shiver, realizing just how lucky you were to survive that era. Let's dive in. Gilbert U238 Atomic Energy Lab. Known as a children's science toy set, yet it contained real radioactive samples. That's the U238 Gilbert Atomic Energy Lab, invented by A.C. Gilbert in 1951. This toy set was advertised as the most modern science set ever created, promising kids they could watch alpha particles travel at 12,000 miles per second and observe atomic disintegration right before their eyes. The product even came with a Geiger-Muller counter to detect uranium, a Wilson cloud chamber, and alpha-beta gamma radiation sources. The original purpose was educational and to spread awareness about radioactivity, but Walt Disney later added creative touches to make it an attractive toy, retailing for $49.50. However, this was a low-level radioactive toy, posing dangers to human health and the environment. Scientists have found evidence that it could cause serious illnesses such as cancer, leukemia, and lymphoma, especially with long-term exposure and use. What's astonishing is that the toy set even claimed, all radioactive samples are completely harmless. Logically, a statement now considered seriously irresponsible. Although it ceased production in the early 1950s and was off the market by the early 1960s, a complete set today can fetch thousands of dollars at auctions. It's hard to believe products like this were once freely available on shelves. Creepy Crawler / Thingmaker. If you ever owned a Creepy Crawler set, you'll surely remember the thrill of creating strangely realistic rubber bugs. Launched in 1965, these toy sets, including the Thingmaker variant, allowed children to melt semi-liquid plastic, called goop, on an electric hot plate heated to over 300 degrees Fahrenheit, about 149 degrees Celsius. This liquid was then poured into metal molds to form creatures like bugs, snakes, or other shapes. While the result was colorful, flexible bugs, the process was incredibly dangerous. Burns were a common accident. Children often lost patience waiting for the bugs to cool and solidify, leading to splashes of molten plastic or super hot candy sauce when trying to remove them from the hot molds with tweezers or sewing needles. Mattel, the manufacturer, even introduced incredible edibles in 1968, using the same device but with semi-liquid candy to make food. The origin of these toys from the Mattel factory showed an era where dangerous and toxic toys were still very common. Nevertheless, the joy of creating these miniature masterpieces still made them memorable toys, albeit often accompanied by scars. Chemistry sets. From the 1940s to the early 1970s, chemistry sets truly brought a bang to the baby boomer generation. These sets weren't just educational toys, they contained real chemicals like potassium permanganate, ammonium nitrate, tannic acid, and sodium ferrocyanide. With these ingredients, blowing yourself up or poisoning yourself was not out of the question. The most popular and dramatic activities children could perform with the deluxe chemistry set included magic tricks, like turning water into wine, then into milk, and finally into beer. The grand finale of this trick was convincing your assistant, your little brother, a dumb neighbor, to drink it. Clearly, these chemistry sets not only carried risks of explosions, burns, and stains, but also encouraged incredibly reckless behavior. Nevertheless, every budding scientist felt like they were discovering the next great thing, even if it came with a few risks. This reflected the lack of strict safety regulations during that period, where the joy of scientific discovery was prioritized over absolute safety. Among these first toys, which ones did you own or remember most clearly? Let us know in the comments below. Gilbert Glass Blowing Kit. The Gilbert Glass Blowing Kit, produced until the early 1960s and still found at garage sales into the next decade, was described as a permanent lung damage waiting to happen. This toy set required children to work with molten glass, which reached temperatures of up to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about 538 degrees Celsius. In an era where safety equipment was often sold separately, whether parents were willing to shell out extra for safety glasses, welding gloves, and an asbestos tabletop was a sure test to see if your parents were cheap or just wanted to injure you. Even inhaling fumes from molten glass could cause serious lung damage. This toy was a clear testament to the philosophy, life's full of risks, kid. Here are some dangerous things to get you used to taking them. And don't come crying to us unless you need stitches. A philosophy that would be hard to accept today. Lawn darts, jarts. Lawn darts, also known as jarts, were one of the most popular outdoor toys of the 1960s, combining the thrill of darts with the open space of a backyard. These darts were heavy, designed with sharp metal tips, and often had fletching for balance in flight. The idea was to throw them so they'd stick into the ground within a designated circle. However, this very design turned them into deadly hazards. When thrown off target or uncontrolled, these darts could become uncontrolled flying missiles, targeting anything or anyone unlucky enough to be in their path. Statistics show they caused over 6,700 accidents. Although banned in the US since 1988 and described by Edge magazine as hard-to-see miniature javelins for people of questionable athletic skill and depth perception, never a good combination, they remained an essential part of backyard barbecues back then. Their danger was likened to getting close to the target often led to a trip to the hospital. Today, this toy is seeing a resurgence, prompting safety agencies to warn about its potential dangers. Easy Bake Oven. The Easy Bake Oven was every aspiring young chef's dream in the 1960s, allowing children to bake their own small cakes. Originally released in the 1950s, this oven was later improved with new technology, becoming more attractive and appealing. What was special was that it operated solely with a standard light bulb to cook food. Children would tear open cake mix packets, mix them, pour them into a small pan, place it in the oven, and then wait to see the light bulb work its magic. Despite offering creative fun, this oven posed many hidden dangers. According to the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, the Easy Bake Oven caused incidents for 249 children who got their hands trapped inside, 77 cases of burns, and 16 cases of second and third degree burns. Shockingly, one 5-year-old girl suffered severe burns and had a finger amputated. The light bulb inside the oven was insanely hot, and many children were burned when touching the metal parts of the oven. Nevertheless, the joy of baking their own small cakes made this toy irresistible. This is a classic example of the innocence of toys from that era, where fun often came with unforeseen risks. Swing Wing. The Swing Wing, released in 1965, was a completely pointless toy that nevertheless made kids of that era beg their parents to buy it after seeing the commercials. It was a plastic headpiece with a chin strap featuring a weighted cord attached to a pivot on top. Its purpose was to be a head-worn version of the hula hoop, with the idea that players would spin it by moving their heads. However, this game truly carried the risk of permanent cervical spine injury, and for proficient swing wing players, it could even lead to paralysis. This toy made players feel dizzy and could cause neck pain. While its silliness was part of the fun, the long-term health risks were significant. This transagram product, despite advertising where the fun comes from, Swing was a typical example of how toys back then often prioritized novelty and entertainment over player safety. Clackers, Click-Clacks. Clackers, also known as Click-Clacks, were a seemingly simple toy that was incredibly difficult and even a bit hazardous. They consisted of two hard, shiny acrylic balls attached to a thin string, threaded through a central ring to be worn on a finger. The player's task was to move their hand up and down at a steady pace, causing the two balls to collide and create a loud clack sound. The faster the speed, the louder the noise, and the higher the chance of bruised hands. Clackers were banned in many schools for noise and safety reasons. When clackers broke or slipped from hands, they could become dangerous flying objects, leading to accidents like property damage or eye injuries when the balls shattered. While a few bruised knuckles might seem a small price for fun, more serious risks led to their removal from the market. The widespread availability of cheap, low-quality versions exacerbated the safety issue. Slip and Slide. Wham-O introduced the Slip and Slide in 1961 as a backyard precursor to water parks. It was simply a long, slippery plastic sheet attached to a garden hose. Millions of units were sold before anyone truly cared about its safety. Players would take a running start and jump onto the mat. However, if a player landed incorrectly or slid off the mat onto rough grass, they were sure to get hurt. Breaking a toe by catching it on the anchor stakes holding the mat down, or getting severe road rash on the driveway if sliding off the end of the mat. That was your problem. Lucky kids only got minor injuries. For adults, playing Slip and Slide reminded them of basic physics laws like an object in motion tends to stay in motion, even after the mat ran out. Eventually, words like spinal cord injury and death were added to the safety warnings in the instruction manual. Do you believe toys like these still pose dangers today? Share your thoughts and don't forget to like the video. Jigsaw Jr. Released in 1958 by Burgess Industries, the Jigsaw Jr. was a toy that, according to its advertisement, it will vibrate enough to cut balsa wood or other thin softwoods without losing your child's fingers. This advertisement, according to the Edge magazine article author, sounded like a creepy pitch from a comedy character. This saw was designed for children to undertake their own woodworking projects, creating shapes and objects as desired. However, despite being able to cut soft wood, its blade still posed a risk of serious injury to small children's fingers if not used carefully. While many Mattel electronic toys of the era were certified safe by Underwriters Laboratories, the Jigsaw Jr. lacked similar assurances. This highlighted a loophole in toy safety regulations back then, where manufacturers could release products with inherent dangers that were not strictly controlled. Mattel Power Shop. The Mattel Power Shop, introduced in 1964, promised dozens of possible projects and hours of fun for children. This toy set simulated the large, noisy machines older kids were allowed to use in junior high. With the Power Shop, 7-year-olds could access tools like a drill press. However, this fun came with frightening risks. This toy set could help you grind off your fingerprints, lose a pinky, drill press the cat. Although designed to educate children about tool use, these machines were too powerful and lacked adequate safety guards for young children. The fact that children could freely use tools capable of causing severed tendons or other serious injuries is alarming by today's standards. This is another testament to the lack of toy safety regulations in the 1960s, where manufacturers could create high-risk products without strict oversight. Water rockets. Water rockets were the gateway for children of that era to the space race, a symbol of the times. For just a few dollars, every child could play their part in the race against the Russians to the moon, while also enjoying a cool, explosive splash on a hot summer day. However, this game carried significant dangers. According to Newton's calculations, 2 pounds of water sealed under air pressure in hard plastic could accelerate to 40 miles per hour, about 64 kilometers per hour, in just a few feet. This powerful launch force was enough to shatter the family car's windshield, or dent the skull of your nerdy cousin Elaine. The lack of safety measures and speed control for these rockets made them a threat not only to players but also to bystanders and property. In an era where safety was less emphasized, the joy of scientific discovery and space simulation often came hand in hand with unforeseen risks. Sky Dancers, Flying Dolls. Sky Dancers Flying Dolls, though manufactured by Galoob Toys and becoming a Christmas bestseller in 1994, carried the inherent dangers of 1960s flying toys. These dolls had a firework-like launch system and were propelled into the air by pulling a string, with impressive spinning wings. However, according to the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, by 2000, over 150 children had been injured using Sky Dancers Flying Dolls. Many cases were tragic, including blindness, broken teeth, and split lips due to the firework exploding before launch, or the doll's spinning wings hitting the person. Although Sky Dancers specifically were a product of the 90s, they exemplify the type of flying toy with propellers or launch capabilities, a type of toy that sources warned is considered a prohibited item for young children, because children can easily get their hands in the propellers, or it can fly into their eyes, causing terrifying consequences. Even today, similar propeller toys are still produced and circulated in some places, indicating that this danger persists and requires strict adult supervision. Zebra Pistol. The Zebra Pistol was one of the popular toy guns in the 1960s, especially a projectile-firing type. This gun fired small rubber pellets. While seemingly more harmless than larger guns, these rubber pellets, when used by a skilled person, could ricochet off plate glass with uncanny accuracy, tailor-made for terrorizing East Side socialites and their tiny dogs while window shopping on Madison Avenue. This shows that even small projectiles could be used to cause harm or harassment. The lack of safety in design and the absence of regulations regarding range or projectile type made these toy guns a potential hidden danger. In an era where innocent child's play could transform into a magnificent destructive experience, the Zebra Pistol was a testament to how seemingly harmless toys could become dangerous in the hands of mischievous children. Star Trek Disc Pistol. The Star Trek Disc Pistol was another toy gun from the projectile firing category, popular in the 1960s. This gun fired hard, colorful plastic discs, about the size of a nickel. Similar to the Zebra Pistol, these discs could also ricochet off plate glass with uncanny accuracy, allowing players to terrorize passersby or damage property. Despite being associated with a popular sci-fi movie, this toy still carried risks of injury, especially to the eyes if projectiles went astray. The ease with which children could turn play into harassment or vandalism without control over range or projectile safety was a serious problem. This type of gun, along with other projectile-firing toy guns, reflected the absence of strict toy safety regulations during that period, where the joy of action simulation often came with unforeseen risks. Which toy on this list surprised you the most with its danger? Don't forget to like the video if you found it interesting. Johnny 7 OMA Toy Gun. The Johnny 7 OMA was described as one of the big guns that turned innocent child's play into a magnificent destructive experience. This gun was large, simulated military weapons, and was designed to fire various projectiles or objects. It was characterized by multiple functions and parts, making it a complex and impressive toy. With its impressive long range, the Johnny 7 OMA was a dangerous toy. It could easily target and damage Hummel and Staffordshire figurines, proudly displayed Royal Doulton china, or really anything on the mantelpiece or étagère. The fact that this toy encouraged property destruction and posed a risk of serious injury to bystanders was a major concern. It was a clear testament to the lack of safety standards in toy design back then, where the allure of simulating war and military power was prioritized over the safety of players and their surroundings. Johnny Eagle Magumba Toy Gun. Similar to the Johnny 7 OMA, the large Johnny Eagle Magumba hunting rifle was also listed among the big guns that turned innocent child's play into a magnificent destructive experience. This toy simulated a large hunting rifle, capable of firing projectiles or objects with the aim of targeting targets indoors. With its impressive long range, it not only caused property damage but also posed a risk of serious injury, especially to the eyes if players or others nearby were hit by projectiles. In an era where kids couldn't wait to go to Vietnam but were too many years too small, guns like the Johnny Eagle Magumba were considered heavy artillery, reflecting a trend of simulating war without adequate consideration for safety consequences. Remco Marine Raider Bazooka. The Remco Marine Raider Bazooka was dubbed the ultimate heavy weapon for kids who couldn't wait to go to Vietnam but were too many years too small. This gun fired a 2-inch long hollow blue hard plastic USMC bazooka projectile with an initial velocity of at least 60 miles per hour, about 96 kilometers per hour. At close range, this projectile could cause serious consequences, such as damaged eyesight or baby teeth. The realistic simulation of military weapons and the ability to generate such powerful firing force was a major danger to children. In an era where action toys, especially for boys, often launched objects like rockets or grenades using springs or air-water pressure, the Remco Marine Raider Bazooka pushed the boundaries of danger to a new level. The lack of strict safety regulations allowed these toys to be sold on the market, turning innocent child's play into a magnificent, destructive experience. Crazy Car. Launched in 1968, Marx's Crazy Car was a children's toy vehicle designed without much thought, with almost no control whatsoever. Children sat inside a round plastic frame and propelled themselves with 2 large wheels with handles. 2 swiveling caster wheels at the front and back ensured the craziness. The children pictured on the product packaging appeared blissfully unaware of their fate. Perhaps they lived in a hilltop neighborhood or at the end of a steep road. Its significant resemblance to a crazy wheelchair should have been a warning sign for parents. Nevertheless, the Crazy Car persisted and reappeared in stores in the 1990s to endanger a new generation of children. This shows that a lack of safety awareness continued for certain types of toys across decades. Projectile-firing toy guns. General. Projectile-firing toy guns could fill entire magazines. Their heyday lasted from about 1955 to 1970 with all sorts, from easily concealable pistols to weapons of mass destruction. These toys typically launched objects like rockets or grenades, using springs or air-water pressure. While offering a feeling of superpower control and the joy of role-playing as a cowboy or spy, these guns posed many dangers. They could cause blinding eye injuries if one stood too close or damage household appliances. Projectiles made of hard plastic, rubber, or paper pellets could fly up to 100 meters. With an initial velocity of at least 60 miles per hour, about 96 kilometers per hour, they could be dangerous, especially causing burns, skin irritations. Many children suffered severe injuries, even blindness or lost teeth. BMD Pistol. The BMD pistol, a product of Bat Masterson, came with 2 magazines and was capable of firing projectiles from the waist down, posing significant danger. This toy was considered a type of weapon that increased aggression, sowing the seeds for extremist phenomena due to illegal weapon use. Although designed to simulate a real gun, its low-level projectile firing capability could cause burns and skin irritation to players or those nearby. This raised a serious concern about how toys could influence children's behavior and perception of violence and weapons. In the context of the 1960s, where toys often encouraged aggression and war, guns like the BMD became a symbol of the lack of control in the toy industry, where the line between play and danger became blurred. Realistically simulating weapons without clear warnings about potential consequences was a disturbing aspect of this toy. The Water Wiggle. The Water Wiggle was a unique summer toy, essentially a hose attachment with a wiggly nozzle that sprayed water unpredictably in all directions. Children loved chasing it, but if the nozzle struck someone, it could cause a stinging sensation. More dangerously, some children even got tangled in it. The uncontrolled operation of this toy, which could deliver unexpected blows or entangle players, was a safety concern. Although it provided thrills for backyard water games, its unpredictable nature made it a potential hidden danger. Super Elastic Bubble Plastic. Super Elastic Bubble Plastic wasn't your ordinary soap bubble. This toy allowed children to blow huge, colorful bubbles that lasted longer than regular soap bubbles. It was produced by Wham-O, a company known for creating almost anything fun from a new, potentially toxic plastic polymer. However, this plastic solution had a strong, foul odor, and children could get dizzy if they weren't careful inhaling it. While kids back then didn't think much of it and simply loved creating giant bubbles, it was clear that exposure to harmful chemicals in the product was a serious concern. Snack Time Cabbage Patch Dolls. Snack Time Cabbage Patch Dolls, SCD, introduced in 1966, were designed to resemble the carnivorous animated character Audrey from the movie Little Shop of Horrors. What was special was that this doll had a unique mechanism that allowed it to eat toy food placed in its mouth. However, this toy was far from harmless. It caused injuries to 35 children who were bitten on the finger by the doll itself. This forced Mattel to recall over 500,000 units already sold on the market. This toy stimulated cravings, especially for fast foods, high sugar, and high-fat foods, leading to childhood obesity and affecting children's health. This is a classic example of how toys could cause both direct physical injuries and negative impacts on children's long-term habits and health, an issue that toy safety regulations of that era could not have foreseen. ThinkMaker's Animal Toys. ThinkMaker's animal toys, especially insects, snakes, centipedes, frogs, etc., were made to look incredibly realistic. While their purpose might have been to stimulate children's curiosity, these toys caused repulsion and endangered children's perception of the animal world. The most serious issue was that they made children unable to distinguish between real and fake when encountering snakes. Another source recounted the experience of being scared by a friend with a realistic-looking green fake snake, causing the writer to scream, crying in terror. This shows that the lifelike appearance of these toys could lead to genuinely dangerous situations if children innocently picked up real animals they thought were toys. Therefore, these toys have been banned for sale to young children in many countries worldwide. Johnny Reb Cannon. The Johnny Reb Cannon was a 30-inch long toy gun, simulating cannons used in the American Civil War. This gun fired paper projectiles using a spring mechanism, but with significant pressure, the projectile could fly up to 100 meters. This offered the feeling of realistic backyard battles. However, these small projectiles could deliver a powerful blow, especially if they hit the wrong target. This cannon could cause blinding eye injuries if players or others stood too close. Additionally, it could damage household appliances and cause environmental pollution, among other harms. Although dodging a few stray shots was considered part of the fun, the serious risks to health and property made this type of toy a classic example of the lack of safety in toy design back then. Fanner 50 cap guns. Fanner 50 cap guns allowed children to load paper caps that produced a loud pop sound every time the trigger was pulled. This offered the thrill and feeling of being a real cowboy. However, they were not only loud but also posed risks. If not careful, these paper caps could cause minor burns. The loud noise could also affect children's hearing with frequent exposure. Although this toy brought fun to children, the fact that it could cause burns and excessive noise made it one of the dangerous toys that needed reconsideration. The popularity of toy guns in the 1960s, where action simulation and challenge were prioritized, often came with risks that were not strictly controlled. Air Cannon, Agent 0M Sonic Blaster, Wham-O Air Blaster. Air cannons like the Agent 0M Sonic Blaster and Wham-O Air Blaster, both introduced in the mid-1960s, were described as great fun. They were plastic guns that could fire powerful blasts of air strong enough to knock over cups, creating a feeling of magic or superpower. However, if aimed too close at someone's face, the air blast could cause a stinging sensation. Mischievous children quickly realized that almost anything, from ping pong balls to prune juice, could be loaded into either of these guns and fired effectively at an adult dinner party. Although the original purpose was to knock over cardboard targets, the fact that children could use them to fire other objects turned them into a potential hidden danger. The lack of safety regulations in design and use made these air cannons a classic example of dangerous toys from that era. If this video has brought you back to a childhood full of memories, share it with your friends to relive these unforgettable moments. Incredible Edibles. Incredible Edibles, launched in 1968, was a Mattel product that used the same equipment as Creepy Crawlers, but with semi-liquid candy called Gobble de Goop, available in 6 different colors and flavors. The idea was that children could create their own edible candies by melting and pouring them into molds. However, this experience came with frightening risks. Many children suffered very severe burns and blisters from these scar-inducing products for children. Impatience while waiting for the candy to solidify, along with attempts to remove them from hot molds with tweezers and sewing needles, led to children being splattered by molten plastic and super hot candy sauce. Although a visit to the emergency room was very educational, it was clear that this toy caused significant injuries. Bouncy animals and plastic toys containing phthalates. Bouncy animals shaped like reindeer, deer, or colorful puppies are surely familiar to families with young children. However, hidden within these seemingly harmless toys is a terrifying danger. They can cause children to suffer from reproductive organ atrophy, leading to infertility. Many complaints have been recorded about children experiencing skin allergies, tongue blisters, and even diarrhea due to contact with bouncy animals and then handling food. In Singapore, bouncy animals have been strictly banned. Analysis shows abnormally high concentrations of phthalate plasticizers in bouncy animals. Phthalates are substances capable of causing cancer, kidney damage, and disrupting the body's hormone system. This is particularly harmful to children, especially boys whose reproductive organs are not yet fully developed, potentially leading to male infertility, while girls face a risk of premature puberty. Although specific examples of bouncy animals might appear more frequently in later decades, the risk from new potentially toxic plastic polymers and chemicals in plastic toys has been a characteristic of the toy industry since the 1960s. Toys like rubber bath ducks also pose similar dangers as they contain phthalates, which are easily released when exposed to hot water or shampoo. Our journey exploring 30 dangerous toys from the 1960s has brought us back to an era where safety was not the top priority in toy design. From radioactive items to sharp tools, from toxic chemicals to serious physical injury risks. These toys are clear proof of the life's full of risks philosophy of that time. Today, thanks to stricter consumer protection laws, especially in the United States and Europe with regulations like CPSIA and the EU Toy Safety Directive, many of them have been banned or recalled. This has helped protect the health and safety of children worldwide. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share, and subscribe to the Back to Yesterday channel to revisit beautiful memories and strange things from the past together. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. See you in the next Memory Discovery Journeys.